The markets are in chaos, Ethan.
I mean, I picked the best time to go all in. I said Friday, I'm going all in on Bitcoin and I'm going all in on high tech.
Hey, well, at least the Bitcoin's going to go back up again.
Man, no, everyone's panicking. Panic is a rise. You see these cycles. But and with all seriousness, let's talk about it from the standpoint of the area that we're in, the high tech AI marketplace. I think there's been a lot of headlines written recently from analysts and pundits. What do you think is happening, John?
Well, I think there are two things coming into play, and I think people, especially in the news, are conflating them a lot. So, on the technology side in the AI space, we all know that there's a ton of hype, right? This echoes of Nortel is the thing that I think about, and the Nortel Cisco competition from back in the day, and the whole dot-com bubble that followed that, and now we're in the AI bubble in a lot of ways. But I think that there's a lot more at play, and I think the timing has just kind of worked out that they are happening at the same time. Not to get into too much technical detail, and maybe we'll get some fact checkers on what I'm about to say from a financial standpoint. But at a high level, one of the things that's causing turmoil across the rest of the market is largely tied to the commodities, specifically energy and by extension, oil. And there are a couple of factors that are coming into play with that. The first one, of course, is there are concerns around the Israel and Iran war and anything that comes with that. Hopefully, no wars happen. Definitely not an advocate for any war.
100%.
But in addition to that, there are other things at play. And essentially, there's some interesting things going on with the Federal Reserve in terms of how they're able to interact with things like the volatility index, the VIX, and ultimately actually able to influence the direction of the VIX. And that can only go on for so long before it catches up to you. And I think we're starting to see that catching up. And one of the ways that is in the news right now is with Japan and the Japanese yen currency. And there's something called swapping that occurs where essentially for like the last 30 years, give or take, Japan has been able to print money and issue 0% loans. And ultimately, what happens is the Japanese industry is then swapping that currency into US dollars. They're then buying assets in US dollars. And those assets are appreciating because, high value real estate or technology companies or whatever it may be, with those assets increasing in value with their interest rate being zero. Well, a couple of factors happened over the last couple of days. The first one is the Fed is now projecting that they are going to start printing some more money. And ultimately, that will cause inflation, more so than we're already seeing. And that inflation will lower the value of those assets. But the other thing that's happening at the same time is for the first time, like in 30 years, Japan's central bank has said that they are actually going to increase interest rates. And it's not like a crazy jump either. It's like very small. But between those two things, you go from a margin of that swapping that's relatively large between the yen and the US dollar. And now you're like this, or you're potentially even inverse. And so that massive cliff that we saw happening end of last week, August 2nd timeframe, because this is going to come out in a little bit, combined with the recent Fed announcements, that's sent everything into chaos. People are freaking out. And that's why you see, I think, in my opinion, the rest of the market down. Not financial advice, but we'll see if people are able to fact check that. But from the people who are super smart posting about this stuff on X, that's what I've been able to glean from it.
Yeah, and this was building up for a time. I think the correction, we were due for a correction and a big one. And there
Yeah.
are a lot of things that we're having to deal with the quantitative easing, which doesn't always make it easy. But well, you're talking to an economist who studied that for school, so I don't want to turn this into an econ 101. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. Maybe that's for a whole different podcast on the financial systems, which I love talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I agree. So the other thing I would talk about is, and I think a lot of the people in this marketplace is, there's also been a lot of investments,
Mhm.
just CapEx investments. And if you watch stocks or people talking about like Goldman Sachs and others talking about where's the return on investment.
Yeah, it's a $600 billion problem.
Yeah. And, for people like us that are close to it, I don't think there is a problem. I just think there's expectations that were set falsely on how long AI will, take. I also think they underestimated how easy it is to adapt and adopt AI into workflows,
Well, it's
which,
cultural change, right?
yeah,
And it's resistance to doing something new, but it's also there, to your point, we were talking about this earlier. There's a big difference between being a individual user that is going to ChatGPT or Claude or any of these other AI tools and just typing something in and getting a result and using that as part of your job. I mean, even with the massive number of users that we saw ChatGPT getting over that, 100 million point very, very quickly. If you think about the global white collar slash knowledge worker population, it is way larger than 100 million or even 200 million, right? And so, there's a concept around bringing that to the masses and having people adopt it. And it's not a bad thing. This is true for every new technology, right? Every trend that we've seen, whether that's the internet, Bitcoin is another one. We're now actually, it's not like a taboo word to say Bitcoin anymore. BlackRock and Larry Fink are all about Bitcoin now.
that just started though, and it's
It
been
just
around for
started,
years.
and that's a 15-year-old technology. So
Yep.
point is, these things take time. There's adoption that occurs from a familiarity standpoint, but also beyond the challenge of you as a single user going in and becoming an expert in, say, prompt engineering or something to consume this AI technology. There's a lot more that goes into it from an enterprise standpoint. Specifically, not everybody wants to be or has the technical capacity to be an expert prompt engineer. They could be the absolute best salesperson in the world. And I know some of these amazing salespeople. They are the most fun to be around. They are so good at what they do, but they're absolutely terrible at using a computer. And they're anywhere from
Yeah.
40 plus years old. But you know what? It doesn't matter because they don't have to, because they deliver results.
Yep.
And it is unfair and unreasonable to say, you have to become good at prompt engineering to do your job now. And what enterprises are realizing, I think, is that they can't force that. I mean, look how good the return to office mandates have gone. You think you're going to get anybody to do something that they don't want to do. Chances are you may have a little bit of success, but it's going to drop your morale. It's going to hurt your culture. And ultimately, it's going to create churn that you don't want to have. So the same thing is true with this AI wave, I think, in a lot of ways. And so one of the challenges at that enterprise scale is you're not catering to the one power user who can do the latest cutting edge thing, that was doing VR when it was first announced, 10 plus years ago. You're catering to an entire organization of potentially tens of thousands of people, all with different skill sets, all with different priorities, all with different views on technology itself. And so it's a lot harder of a problem to solve. And I think organizations are realizing, like, yes, this AI thing is moving a lot faster than a lot of these other trends have been because it has such a monumental impact if it's used properly. But figuring out what are the ways that we can go in and actually make that salesperson that doesn't know how to use technology able to perform and get the same or nearly the same benefit out of that AI solution as somebody who's a super advanced power user, or at least bridge the gap between those two things. That's where things are stuck. And I'm not going to make this a sales pitch for what we do, but that's the area that we fit into and we're focused on, is to democratize that AI technology so that you can get benefit out of it at an enterprise scale, even if you're not the most technical person. So I think that's the big focus that's happening right now.
Yeah, I would agree. And when you see these large enterprises, it's sometimes easier to deploy technologies in smaller, mid-sized companies. And I think there's a little bit of fear of missing out, keeping up, not being disrupted. And that's true. You need to pay attention. AI is here. It's not going away. But I think there's when you have a much larger organization, you're talking 10,000, 100,000 people, it's much more of a change management. It's just not even having the right technology. It's having the right indoctrination. It's having the right
Training.
training programs,
Yep.
and it's just having patience. knowing that you need to bring the people along with the systems. And if
Yeah.
you force it too much, your result may be not what you expect.
Yeah.
And
And
I,
then well, I was
go
going to say
ahead.
the other thing is the data, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that,
Always, it goes back to the data in the data center or in the IT space. You're only as good as your information. And that is true.
that's kind of a cop out in a lot of ways. You know, people say, "Oh, well, if the data is not good, then the output's not going to be good." But it's actually really true. You know, to the extent that, and we were having that conversation earlier today about the importance of actually having your data ready for AI. And I think that term has been thrown around a lot and probably doesn't hold the value that it should. Because in reality, you're only going to get as good of an output from your AI as that data that you're putting into it. And that's kind of inherently obvious, right? Same with Google. If you type in Google search and you press enter and it's a bunch of random characters, you're not going to get the result that you're looking for. But I think the thing that is maybe not considered as much as it should be is that these AI technologies. I'll give you a good example. This is kind of a funny story of what happened in last week. You know, we have really robust monitoring on all of our solutions, and this wasn't a big deal. It only cost us a couple $100. But what happened is we have an intern who's producing some product videos for one of our technologies, Auto Reports. And Auto Reports analyzes your documents. And one of the use cases for Auto Reports is analyzing SEC filings, 10K reports, and then it will read through that document and it will output a very structured format of all of the key information that summarizes that 10K report for like a financial analyst. Super cool use case. And so we were making a product video on that use case. And I was looking at some of our billing dashboards, and I saw this really anomalous spike of 100 million tokens for one of our AI systems. And I was like, what in the world is going on here? The system has barely any usage at all. And then suddenly it goes from like 1 million tokens a day to 100 million in one day. And, it cost us $500 or something in addition to that. And I was like, not so much that it's a huge deal because there was value in what we were doing, but it wasn't the norm. And so my team investigated it. It turns out it was because there was a financial report that was uploaded that was like 300 pages long of, probably close to 1 million tokens per submission, and we did 100 of them. And the intern that was creating this video was simply making the video and did a couple of takes to make sure that he did it right and did the right narration and showed the different aspects of the process. And so I looked at it, it's like, where did this bill come from? It turns out it was from the intern uploading these documents. And so my point is tying this back to the preparation of the data. That's, at least in the engineering and systems world, what we call an edge case, which is something that could happen, could very reasonably happen. But if you think about like the normal model bell curve type of scenario, it's out at 2 or 3 standard deviations, which is like a 5% to a 0.3% chance of actually happening. And that was one of those edge cases where we never expected somebody to upload an enormous document that many times to this specific system. And so we didn't have the necessary gates and checks and controls and notifications applied to that. And fortunately, it wasn't a $500,000 mistake. It was only a $500 mistake. But it goes to show you that even with all of the monitoring things that we had in place, that was something that got through. And that's what we call an edge case. And so that's a great example of your data and the expected data payloads of an enterprise where you've got tens of thousands of people who all work a little bit differently, who think a little bit differently. They could pull some document or something that has some nuance like that, like this one had 300 pages in it, that suddenly says, okay, this is going to turn everything you think about how you've handled these things upside down, right? And result in a surprise bill, a data leak, a poor response that is then trusted and relied upon by that individual. You never know. And so those are the kinds of things that are those hidden risks that, as an individual user, you would never, ever, ever encounter. Because if I was the individual user consuming this auto report technology on my own, you can guarantee that I checked the cost of running each report before I run the report. But, and it's not this intern's problem, but he doesn't even know or care. He just knows that he needs to upload the document to do his job, and he's going to do it. And that's the result. So it's a disconnect when you're having to put yourself in other people's shoes versus doing something on your own. And so we're seeing that in the AI space, just like all these other transformations.
Yeah, we call it in the when you were talking about that scenario, I was thinking back, in the day of the client server and data center build out, we call that the shadow IT. You have people in your organization, you're like, what's this bill? Like, what's the server that's under the desk? And it's, for people that are doing their job, they're just trying to get stuff done. It's not malicious, but there's a hidden cost.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing's happening with the unknown of adoption of AI. People want, the users want to use it, and they're trying to figure out. They don't think about the cost, but it's just a new paradigm that we're going to have to learn as we go.
Yeah, so it's all about putting in that enterprise structure, thinking these things through, and accounting for as many of those edge cases as you can. And unfortunately, you're not going to get all of them,
No.
which is an effort that's futile in nature overall. But you can at least get enough of them, and make sure that if they do happen, they don't happen again. And you put the parameters in place. And that's one of the cool things about being in this space, is that you're constantly learning and seeing how these things change and evolve. And it's companies that are more agile, that are testing these things out, that are then able to share these learnings with the bigger companies. And then the bigger companies are able to benefit from that knowledge and adopt. So hopefully somebody that's watching this is like, oh, that's really interesting. Didn't think about that. So.
No, it is amazing. Coming from a very large organization in my previous role to a smaller, nimble organization, being on the front lines of AI, you kind of underestimate how much we are learning and knowledge-wise, because all we do is focus on AI. We don't think about anything else. We're just laser focused on this one technology stack and how to implement it in an enterprise. And it's amazing when we talk to very large established companies how much they ask us for help.
Well, it's build versus buy, right?
Yeah.
The opportunity cost for you to spin up your own AI expertise in the organization is so high because you have people cost, and those people could go to a company who lives and breathes AI all day long, which is probably a little bit more appealing. There are good things and bad things about that. But at the same time, if you're starting on this journey from scratch, just the knowledge that we're talking about that you have to acquire and make mistakes on your own. That's why I think we're seeing, a large portion of the market, probably 95%, that are really shifted toward this buy model for AI, which means you're using a partner of some sort to implement and develop and provide the services around this AI versus building something in-house, because the time, the expense, and the opportunity cost. And in a lot of ways, it's also a distraction from your business's core competency, which is, making life-saving medications, or, servicing the food supply, or, handling the financial markets, whatever those things are, right? This AI thing, in a lot of cases, is kind of a bolt-on that needs to be integrated into the business. So yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of companies are learning. There's been so much capital investment or capex in just building out these massive data center farms, GPUs, just because no one wanted to be left behind. But now the dust is settling on a lot of that investment, and people are going, okay, now how do we extract value from this? And we're seeing that firsthand from customers asking us, can you all help us realize the full potential of our investment from the last year or two, which is awesome to be able to be part of that. You definitely want these large capital investments to pay out and pay off. So
yeah,
it's really rewarding.
It's not as easy as plugging in a server, unfortunately.
No, this is the new playbook.
I wish it was, but we had to work backwards, right? Because we wanted to provide something that was truly turnkey, and there's so much nuance. This is cutting edge technology, right? So it's not. I would say there are different levels of productionization of a solution, right? The gold standard is something that has been out and available and well documented for decades. Like Linux would be a good example of that. It's open source, a lot of contributors, everybody kind of knows how it works if you're in that space. It's well documented. yes, there are quirks, but like generally it's supported, and you can pick up the phone and call your friend, or you can ask one of these AI models, like, how do you do X, Y, and Z? And it will give you an answer. But this AI space, especially with how fast it's moving, we're not there as an industry collectively whatsoever. A lot of this stuff, at least looking back from, say, a month ago before, it's all duct tape and super glue. And one of the things that we've been able to do and are very appreciative of is having fantastic partnerships with Dell and NVIDIA to actually bring this, I would call it more of a development kit of solutions
Way.
into that production space. And there were a lot of quirks, there were a lot of headaches associated with it, but we got it. The production releases of these things are made available now where it's no longer duct tape and super glue, but we're just at the cusp of that as an industry now holistically deploying AI yourself versus just going to one of these cloud service providers. And so there's a lot of change happening, and it's only going to get better, which is good. And that pace is only going to accelerate, and it's going to get easier over time. But even still right now, like, our customers are coming to us asking us, hey, how do you deploy this AI? Because we don't know how to do it ourselves. And we're very fortunate that we can actually say, yes, we have a solution for that. But it's a very specialized field, at least as of right now. But I think the good news is that will start to become more common, and then we can shift our focus up stack in just building awesome, cool products versus that infrastructure side that's being commoditized.
Yeah, no, that you're right. We're still very in the early phases of this new technology.
Mhm.
It's AI as a concept in academia has been around for years, but getting into production, getting into actual business users' hands is really new.
Yeah.
And you, if you mind, the talent, the knowledge, the know-how, there's still a gap. There's an educational gap, actually. And I was, we're kind of getting towards the end of August or getting into August, and school is coming back. Much to my children's chagrin, they got to get back into the schoolroom. And some of my children and other of my friends are starting to matriculate to university. In fact, I was having a conversation last night with a good friend of ours that is trying to look at universities like Carnegie Mellon, UT, and we were just having a conversation like, what are you going to study? And he's very technical as well. And we were just having to talk about what AI is doing to the education market.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah, it's
that
gonna
is
be huge.
that's a great use case, and that's one that AI for good. I think AI is going to totally enable um, the human intelligence equation to go up. I
Mm-hmm.
truly believe in that. So let's get on that a little bit. What do you think about the upside in the education space for using these AI systems?
Yeah, so I think that it's a game changer in so
Yes.
many ways. I think it's an extremely positive game changer too. I went through college when Google was very mature as a product, right? I don't know. I guess people will be able to do the math. I was 2014 to 2017 was my college time. So not that long ago. I'm a pretty young guy still. And so like these technologies to be able to have information at your fingertips was extremely readily available. It was, documented, standardized, and I was and still am very good at using the advanced search commands. Like you can specify which file type you want. So you can type in PDF and it will only show you PDFs in Google, and you can specify very specific sites and you can get that information. Pro tip for people who are in the business world: a lot of companies that buy Gartner reports, if you type in the name of that company, or you find out what their digital asset manager is, and then you type in the keyword of that report and search, say, show me only PDFs, you can find the Gartner reports for free without having to fill out their email subscription form. So I did that kind of thing a lot. So information super readily available. But this AI shift is so fascinating. Like we could have a whole conversation around the hallucination risk and things like that. But let's just put that aside for a second. Say, if what you get out of the AI is true and trusted and honest, the implications of actually being able to have that information at your fingertips and ask it any question about anything and get valuable insights without having to search through hundreds of web pages for that knowledge. I mean, I use it today, every day for things like that. And
Do as well.
it's a game changer from an education standpoint, right? Because now you're able to consume that information faster and potentially make connections that you couldn't make otherwise. Like, let's say you've got this research paper or something, you're writing an essay on it, whether you're in high school or college or whatever, and you just have an idea. Like, I wonder if this concept could be applied to X, Y, and Z, whatever those things are. The only way to do that before was to go to Google and try and come up with the right combination of keywords to compare that initial concept to one of those other things that you're wondering if there's, crossover. Like maybe it's a medical study and you're reading something about like sleep deprivation, and then you connect the dots and say, well, I wonder, if sleep deprivation can decrease the mass of your brain over time, then I wonder if it could also, impact my ability to, dream and formulate ideas. And what's the correlation between that and, how much money somebody makes in a year, or college acceptance rate, or whatever, these different totally disparate things. Well, what the AI is able to do is, while it may not be able to directly connect those things and say, hey, you need to look at this exact specific article, what it can do is it can use its understanding of those different things and at least create some kind of response for you that has keywords and phrases and thoughts, chains of thinking that allow you to say, that's the industry specific term for that I had no idea that existed, and I wouldn't have been able to find it otherwise. And all you have to do is type in that new industry specific term. Maybe it's an acronym or some really complicated combination of 3 or 4 words into Google, and there's all this information about how that first thing that you're thinking about is directly connected to that second thing. Or, like this whole financial market conversation that we were having before. I am by no means a PhD in the markets, but I read about this stuff. It's interesting to me. But there are words and terminology that some of these super smart analysts on X were talking about that I just said, I got to look this up. And I did 2 things. I type in the words, do it in Google the old-fashioned way, read a bunch of sources because I like to make sure that the AI is not hallucinating and telling me the wrong thing. But I'll also take that same post of 2 paragraphs and I'll put it into one of these AI applications. It'll say, explain this to me. And I will ask it questions based on what I understood from the Google search that I did to validate that I'm actually tracking it right. And I'll be able to get an answer. So, it's self-guided, self-enabled education. And for the people who are really excited and driven and want to do that, and I think, maybe now there will be more people moving in that direction because it's not as hard anymore. I would spend weeks going through, hundreds of pages of search results on Google to write a research paper when I was in college, and you don't have to do that anymore, it's truly remarkable.
So I am of the Gen X age and went to college. And I'll let you all in the audience decide kind of when that was. I think you can look it up. But it was when the internet was coming online, becoming a thing. So I got to experience this unique time, like in high school, like no one, what's the internet? No one knows. And then in college and university, it started to become a thing. And so I kind of entered into the workforce during the internet age. But I can tell you, as a Gen Xer, uh, this technology now that we have with the current AI models, I'm having to constantly, and I'm starting to use it more. Again, it's like that conversation we had about learning that you have this tool now that you didn't have just a year and a half or 2 years ago. That's gotten better. It's going to get better and better. That you should probably be using it because I'm doing things a certain way. Then I've caught myself going, wait, I probably should have started co-creating with the AI and blending the old way versus the new way to get to the same outcome, but much faster.
Yep.
And it is something I think that corporations are having to learn, individual people are learning. And I think even children, even my kids, I'm telling you, I don't think they use AI as much as they should. So going back to how do you use it? What's the right way to use it? What to look out for? That's something that's going to evolve as more and as it lives with us for more and more. And personalized education. Can you imagine that AI will be able to know where you're strong, where you're weak, and can adapt itself to be the ultimate personalized learning, giving more one-on-one time that a teacher could ever give you.
Yep. Yeah, it's really fascinating, and there's a really cool new technology that the company called Anthropic that makes the Claude AI. They released this recently, and it's a super creative idea. It's very simple, but the way that they implement it is just awesome. We're probably going to provide some kind of capability around that technology. It's called artifacts. And essentially what it is their large language model is really good at code. And there are a lot of different coding frameworks out there, but one of the most popular ones is something called React. It's used for a lot of websites. There are a lot of applications that use React because it can go from both your web browser to an app on your computer to an app on your phone. And it's able to manage all of those things. We use React for all of our applications. It's an open source JavaScript library. But what React is really good at is being able to create high quality user interfaces. And so what the Claude artifacts capability allows you to do is actually you can prompt Claude to say, hey, make me an artifact that does X, Y, and Z. And that could be literally anything that you could come up with. We actually used it recently to make a interactive dashboard to showcase some of our different products. And you could actually toggle it with a menu and click, show me this industry vertical, show me that industry vertical, filter by application. I didn't have to ask one of my engineers to make this. And it wouldn't have been hard for them to do, but it would have probably taken them like 10 hours to code what I was looking for manually. And I was able to go to Claude and I said, this is what I want. This is the information I want. So I want industry vertical as a nav bar that you could click on. I want the titles to say turnkey AI for financial services. And then I want a table with each of my 5 product names and use cases for each one of those products. And I wanted 3 use cases per product offering per industry. And there are 25 industries that we provide support for, more really, but 25 categories of industries. And I was able to hit a button and it built that entire framework. So all I had to do was say what the products were and what the use cases were. And the entire framework was created in like 30 seconds for me. And then I spent about an hour creating the data payload that detailed which industry vertical, what products, and what use cases for each of them. It was just text formatting basically. And that artifact, that interactive web page, we were able to embed into some of our training and enablement materials. And that's a revolutionary game changer because you can iterate and build these like really small or moderately complex tools to accomplish very specific things just by saying, I want it to look like this. And you press a go button and it will build that thing for you now. And so as you think about tying that back to like education and things like that, let's say you're in a mathematics class and you're taking calculus. I took, advanced calculus in high school. I love math, but like I learned very quickly that it was not my thing conceptually past a certain point. But one of the hardest things to do is when you're doing integrals in calculus is to understand the way of thinking about which different formulas and approaches you need to take to solve that math equation. And then also being able to visualize how that math equation maps to whatever you're modeling. Like one of the things that I remember because it was a little bit traumatic was modeling if you've got a cone shaped vessel that's holding fluid in it and that's being drained, the pressure is going to drop as the fluid decreases because there's less pressure in the tube, right? The water is going out the bottom. But that's going to vary the flow rate. And so if you have to apply integrals and calculus to model that flow rate over time. And that's a super hard thing to visualize. But you could actually, go to Claude and you could type in what this math problem is, create a 2D or 3D visualization of this. It would pull in all of the open source libraries that do, 3D visualization of those kinds of things. And it would make a app that's just for you for that specific problem, and it would show you how it models it over time. And from a learning and education standpoint, like that's the kind of thing that we're just starting to see come into the market. And that's going to change everything in terms of how people think about software and how people think about tools, because now you can build your own tools and you don't have to be a software engineer.
It's insane. And I will tell you, I had an experience actually before the summer at the end of the school year where I'm known as the math guy in my house. My wife's like, she's very good at math, but she doesn't like to teach it. But my daughter was having problems or having some challenges to get a concept, and dad forgot how it was done. And so I was racking my, it was like something we needed to teach her it was like we were time bound. Like there was a test and like, we got to get this. So like, do we need a tutor? What do we need to do? So what did that? I went, let's just see what our friendly AI is. And I went into AI and I said, teach us the subject. And the good news is they had a fact book. They didn't show how to work the problems, but we had the answer key. And the AI was like, absolutely, no problem. Step by step by it taught my daughter better than I think I could have taught her. And we learned together. And I just kind of sat back going, I was saying, talking to my children, going, you need to start using these tools. Obviously, there's a right answer in math. You don't have to worry about hallucinations. Either going to get to the right answer or not. And it's a really good teacher. So we're just in the early innings of this technology. So there's going to be a lot of good that comes out of this for the people that embrace it.
Yeah. It's just all about making sure that good is, outweighing any potential negative issues. And I think that's a good foray into the whole political space. There's a lot of concerns about that right now.
We want to go there right now. We want to talk politics.
100%.
I don't.
I mean, that's freedom, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's a big one. It's a big one. So let's open that. Let's walk through that door right now. So politics. What do you think? And this is an open forum. Everyone can agree or disagree with this, but what do you think the role of government should be? That's a big one. I've read a few. I've read one book on it that has a very tops down. The government needs to be heavily involved in this to manage bad actors versus a laissez-faire approach. I mean, so what do you think?
So I'm a big believer in freedom. I think that our government is dysfunctional. I think pretty much everybody would agree with that. I mean, if you just look at the polls on the approval rating of Congress, I think everybody can agree.
Yeah, there's something awry a little bit. We know it's not in the glory days it used to be.
And there's so much bureaucracy for absolutely everything. There's waste, fraud, and abuse everywhere. And so I think that for those reasons, I don't think the government should play a role and get involved in anything related to cutting edge technology unless it's for some kind of true moral, dilemma, like, for example, human cloning and things like that. And we could spend a whole other conversation on that. Let's not get into that today. Let's focus on the AI.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't ready for that discussion. But yes.
That was a curveball, Ethan.
I think we'll have to go on Joe Rogan for that one.
Yeah. So, but specific to the AI, I think the biggest risk that we face as a country is that there are other countries out there that are not fans of us, that do not have the regulatory considerations that are currently being talked about and imposed on us. And so the risk here is that the bad people are always going to do what the bad people are going to do. And they're going to ignore the laws anyway, if they're in our country. And if they're not, then they don't have the laws to deal with at all. And they may actually be encouraged to do the not so good thing because it's going to hurt the people that they don't like. And as a result, those ramifications are going to stifle our ability to keep innovative. I'll give you a great example. One of the biggest things in the news, and I'm not going to name names, but there's this thing called the CHIPS Act, which regulated how all of the semiconductor manufacturers can produce chips. Well, guess what? China is still buying all of those chips. They're just going through another country that's reselling them. They just don't do it direct. And the implications of that are huge, because the whole point of that act, whether you believe in it or not, and that's a whole other conversation that I don't want to get into, but the whole intent was to give the US a greater advantage in this innovative space. And all that happened was we created less transparency through this obfuscation in financial and logistical supply chain engineering associated with routing these things through different sources to ultimately end up in China anyway. And the amount of probably bureaucracy and time and other things that it cost these innovative companies who are creating these chips. And again, it's not the Chinese companies that are making these chips. These are American companies, right? This is Intel, it's NVIDIA, it's AMD. Probably the bureaucracy and red tape that was added internally at those companies to manage that, delay their ability to innovate when it's still going to end up there anyway. They could have spent all of that on creating better things and putting that in the hands of our country and our allies more efficiently. So I think holistically, the big issue here is what's that pace of innovation going to look like? And how can we ensure that we stay ahead of the curve as it relates to using this technology for good? And I think the good thing that I'm seeing in our holistic culture and society today is people are starting to be more willing to stand up for what's right and you know, voice the moral objection to things that don't make sense, and without the fear of being canceled, at least as much as before. And that goes for all sides, right? It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal or libertarian, whatever it is, you know, people need to speak more truth. And I think that's starting to happen now, which is a wonderful thing. But ultimately, it's not going to be the government that's going to determine how we should use AI. We, the people who live in at least this specific country, you know, the whole point of a republic, which is what we are technically, is that the people get to decide what is right and what is wrong. And so, you know, we're voting with our wallets in a lot of ways with this stuff. There's a company out there that does something that you don't like with AI, find somebody who is doing it the right way. You know, and that market and that freedom of expression at the individual level, you know, if people believe that they're empowered to actually have a voice or have a contribution to that decision versus pawning it off to some government regulatory body that may or may not have their best interests in mind or may not be influenced by special interests, lobbyists, or corporations or foreign monetary policy. Now suddenly you can shift everything more so than you'd ever think that you could through the simple individual. And so I think, you know, in that regard, I think you understand where I'm come out and land on this. But, you know, let the market, let the people decide, and things will work out. I mean, we've seen that with the internet. Yeah, there are bad things that happen in the internet every single day. But there's also a tremendous amount of good that's come out of it as well.
Yeah, anytime a government tries to stifle innovation or progress for fear, or just it doesn't work out well in the end. In fact, you can even correlate this to the Bitcoin discussion. You know, there was one like if we don't get on board, somebody else is, and the technology is here to stay, and either we become a leader or we become try to follow. And so I do agree in our company, in our country, anytime regulation is only good if it opens up free markets and economy and allow innovation. If you have bad actors or people doing things the wrong way, peace. But it needs to be a finely defined role.
Mhm.
One thing I want you to comment on, and we need to talk about, is you use the word bureaucracy a lot when we were talking about government, and that's a negative. AI can also be a helpful companion to our government. So,
Absolutely.
how do you think? And I mean, I haven't done deep thought on this yet, but I've started to think, how do you think our government could use AI for good?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that immediately come to the top of my mind. So the first one is, and this has been talked about for a while, and there are a couple of implementations of it. We could actually do it today as well through our technology, and maybe we should now that we're releasing this. Well, I'll have one of my interns put together because it will be that easy. There's been discussion, and Elon Musk has said that one of the things that he wants to do with his XAI is take omnibus bills and other, you know, these ridiculous 2,000 page bills that are redlined by 100 plus people that you get 12 hours to read the whole thing, and it's not possible, or maybe they're longer than that, and the time period is shorter, and then they have to vote on these things.
Yeah.
And there's all these things that are snuck in on
Or
every
okay.
political
Yeah.
agenda, and that's not good, right? This is the kind of bureaucracy and subversiveness that is impacting and I think hurting our country holistically. We need more transparency about these things. And so one of the things that Elon had proposed is creating AI that will review the bills and then outline or flag things that are snuck in or are egregious, or take your term of evaluation and flag those. And I think that's a amazing way to put more control back in the hands of the citizens, to be able to actually make a distinction and determination as to, is this something that I should support, or should I call my local congressperson or senator and voice my concerns about X, Y, and Z, whatever that may be. And so I think that's a great immediate use case. And by the way, we can do that with auto reports. The only issue is going back to the story about the 10K. If we got a 2,000-page bill, the cost for something like that is going to be very expensive. We need to get cheaper models, and those are coming too. But I think that's an immediate one that I think of. What do you think?
I 100% agree. I think an immediate use case that I would like to see implemented in our, soon and within the government is informing the populace more on the issues, because there is a lot of red tape, and you have to almost feel like you have to be a quasi government official to really know the issues you're voting on. You have to spend a lot of your own time on that. I think it's gotten so complicated. And I love the fact, I think you could use AI to kind of give you a summary. Like, give me the executive overview. Like, I see this 1,000-page report, net it out. What am I voting on here? What's the outcome? And I think if you provide transparency to the voting populace, there'll be a more informed public when they go to the polls. Not only even in federal, but even at the state and local. I'll be honest, I've been guilty of this. I've gone to vote in some of the local elections, and I don't vote on a party. I've always voted kind of based on what the people stand for. So I don't know if that makes me. I vote based on what the issues at hand. But it's very hard to keep up with the local issues versus the state issues. And it'd be very good to have a pre-brief before you go to the polls. And
Well,
I
I
think
totally agree. Yeah. Well, and one of the things that could be really cool that could actually be done rather easily. The biggest challenge that I see when I do my research for who I'm going to vote for these state and local elections, like you're
yeah,
talking about,
it's a lot.
the information is so hard to find.
It
And
is.
it's not some big fancy presidential campaign where you can go to the person's name.com and everything's nicely laid out because they have the money to do that. Right. These are sites that are strung together on probably a shoestring budget if it's a
And
local
people are
election.
going door to door and
Yeah,
trying to talk
you
about
can't
it.
find the information to even make a determination as to whether that person's good. And sometimes the only way to get it is to search a local newspaper for an online article that they did one interview that talks about the thing that you're looking for. What would be really cool is, and this wouldn't be too hard to do, if the candidate could simply make an AI that they could post on their social media platforms, right? It could just be in their bio. It's, if you want to talk to the virtual version of me, they could load in their entire party's platform. And this, I mean, maybe we should
John,
sell
we should just do
that
this.
idea.
We're
Yeah,
based in Austin, so
yeah,
for any candidates that listen to a LinkedIn AI, which is probably low,
yeah,
I think we should just offer that.
yeah.
Anyway, I think as we're talking, going,
So
I would love to have that.
yeah, you load in your platform, you answer, maybe there's a standard form of questions that's like all of the major things, and you give your 2 or 3 sentence answer for those things. And of course you could add more things if you're talking about something that maybe isn't the norm, or you want to give more detail, but that is your knowledge base. And then, the most important thing is that the AI that powers it needs to be trusted to the point that it's not going to influence on either side of the spectrum. And I don't even like the whole two-party system. So let's just say in the sphere of political
Government.
views that exist, but giving an unbiased representation, whether you're up here or down here or over there, whatever it is. And then when somebody says, well, tell me about your policy and stance on gun control or gun rights or immigration or whatever it is, it will give you that answer. And that would be so much better than having to source all these disparate sites. And the other cool thing is you could upload your interviews and your news articles and transcripts of your podcasts that you may do on Joe Rogan or wherever else to that and be able to use that as your source information. So I think there's a lot of
And the
opportunity.
candidate could have full rights and they could approve it. And they said, this is me. This AI is saying what I want to say to everyone that can't find it. I think it would be a great transparency engine
Yeah. Yeah,
that,
it would also keep people honest too, because I mean, provided that you can, quality assure the AI to not make up things that are outside of the spectrum, it will give you the exact answer as opposed to somebody dancing around the potential question, which I think the politicians probably won't like very much, but I think as a citizen and a voter, that would definitely be pretty cool.
yeah, I mean, they may have some, copyright, oh, is this thing going to represent me well? And can I trust it? That's fair. You need to have those kind of rules and regulations, and that can be solved for.
Yeah.
And with the right data sets and the right training, we're past that. That can be handled if implemented correctly.
Mhm.
Um, with that being said, though, we're talking about kind of government regulation, but there's just kind of copyright and IP protection. We kind of touched on this a little bit, I think, on our last podcast. Um, what do you think businesses or people that are embracing AI technology and co-creating, like, what do you think is going to happen to the copyright IP protection laws?
Yeah,
I
it's
don't think they've been
interesting.
really, I don't think they've been, we're not quite there yet. I don't feel like we have a good handle on it.
Yeah, so we touched on this last time, and so a recap for those who didn't get to hear
Yeah.
that. I come from a creative background, so I was a filmmaker, and I loved making film art. Right, this is like epic cinematic movies and motion picture type stuff, and I hold my creations very dear. Right, it was an effort in bringing something into the world. It's like my baby type of thing. And the amount of effort and love and focus that was put into creating some of these artworks is just absolutely enormous. And so I'm very proud of them. I love that they exist and live on. So I give that context in the sense that I guess I'm kind of interestingly between these two worlds of being able to speak on the behalf of the artist and also being able to speak as somebody who is in that tech space. And I think that there are a couple of components and considerations that I have personally around what's being created. The first thing is I want to have the ability to make a living and take care of the people that I love and get money to be able to do more art as well as anything else that comes with the perks of having money. But there are considerations beyond that. So being able to protect what is mine and own what is mine is a really important thing. I've since, of course, moved on into the software world, so like the art wasn't ever really my source of income. I was doing corporate work to pay the bills, and it was just more about creating fun stuff that I could release, and if it made money, great. The second component of it is around what that art in the hands of other people can do and what it means. And there's a common, I think it's common phrase in the kind of creative world that everybody is a thief, which means that anybody who has that like artistic mindset, I mean, even in a
I would
business
I would say it
standpoint.
differently. Maybe everybody's a muse.
Ah, all right. Well, I
That's
don't
the
I don't say it out
that's
of
the
like a
positive
negative.
spin. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone is you can be inspired by them, but it's true.
Sure.
There's a
Well, you see something and you say, I
yeah,
really like that. I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna use it. And there's nothing new under the sun is the more pop
true.
culture kind
Yeah,
of phrase for it. And so there's a big opportunity holistically to get inspired by creative people. And I've certainly done it through my artistic career. One of my favorite movies, absolutely of all time, is Zack Snyder's 300. I saw that when I was a kid. It's comic book, live
yeah,
action. It was all blue screen, like CGI in 2006. That was
gorgeous.
phenomenally done. And in that movie, because I'm a martial artist, I love the beauty of combat in terms of, moving with swords and all of that stuff. The choreography in that movie was phenomenal. And so that really inspired me in a lot of ways with my film career. And, I wanted to create something that was as exciting and epic as that. And one of the coolest shots in that film is when Leonidas is going to the oracles, and there's this massive cliff that he has to surmount. And he does this epic jump shot where, he's jumping and he grabs onto this rock and he's like hanging off the side of this cliff. And it was just so cool. I was like, I want to remake that. So in one of my music videos that I did for a rather large band, it was all about, pursuing what you love and what you're passionate about, even if you've got chaos and darkness chasing you from behind. And there's a big mountain in the middle of the desert that you have to run up, and the mountain, of course, represents the struggle. The dark cloud of evil behind you is all of the baggage that we all accumulate over the years of just living and everything that comes with that. And you're trying to escape that, surmount this mountain, and get to what you love, which could be romantic love, it could be family love, or it could be self-actualization and the pursuit of passion. Well, it was a perfect opportunity to incorporate that mountain and that epic jump shot that inspired me from 300. And so I built my own version. There's a cool clip. Maybe we'll show it or something on this podcast. But it does the side by side of what mine looked like versus what theirs looked like, and different styles, different overall implementation. But it's like you could totally see that one was inspired by the other. And so I see this whole AI thing as being very parallel to that. So you look like you want to say something, so I'll let you go and then I'll
I'm
finish
thinking
my
through as
story.
you're talking, there's a big difference between plagiarism versus co-creation or adding, being inspired by something. There's a very big difference. You can either copy exact or be inspired and pay homage to, and that happens all the time in creation.
Yeah.
Authors read great books, they get inspired to write something else, their music, that's fine. And I also know that there was a lot of in the news just about how these AI models are trained on sometimes is that do I want that I created being part of the AI model, or I'm not sure if I approve that. So there's that fine line, and this is not a new concept. I think back to the whole Napster phenomenon when the rights management, oh, I'm just ripping songs and I hadn't paid the artist for it. Now with AI, it's the ability to replicate, make copies of, hard to know if it's an authentic version or or a duplicate. That's going to be more of an issue that we're going to have to address. And I do think technologies like the blockchain technology, digital rights management, there are technologies out there that you can say that piece of code or those bits were originated by me, and you can stamp it. So I just think that the AIs are great at copying and parroting what they have been trained on, and people are going to now be able to build and create faster than ever before. I think this is something that we're going to have to live with, but we can't ignore it. I do think the artist, the creator that really built that, even your technology, let's use the IP of your company. If someone were to come in and create that, you'd probably be pretty upset about it. If you saw your IP quickly copied, there's got to be protection for that. And there's no way around that. We have to as an industry. And maybe that's where some of the government regulation from theft and bad actors and legislate, that might be a place where they can help, because that's bad actors in a free market economy.
Yeah.
The way I think about it. But yeah, I do realize that, digital humans, fakes, deep fakes, it's going to be even more of an issue where you're going to have to really trust what you read and really trust the source of where you're getting it from.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll just leave it at that. I mean, it's true. I mean, you can see things, and as the AI gets better, whether you're watching a short on YouTube, like, was that real or is that AI generated? It's getting harder to tell.
A lot harder. Yeah, we're getting close, which is really cool in a lot of ways. It's also scary in other ways. But I think that I think it all comes down to intent for all of these things. Thinking about the copyright side of it, if my goal is to rip off the movie or some other creator and pass it on, that true plagiarism use case, obviously that's not a good thing. But there's so much opportunity to unlock creative potential
Yeah.
that, over rotating on that as the concept of what you're trying to get out of it or the risk associated with that, I think it's unmeasured and an overreaction in a lot of ways. Because, if I've got my creative capability, like my music videos, the epic cinematic stuff, that's all on the internet right now. I think the cool thing about that is if somebody uses that data and encodes it as part of their model, then that means that that model has learned stylistically how to create something like the way I would create something. And there's something to be said about the benefits of something like that. And yes, you could make an argument that maybe the base model that you're using has a data processing agreement associated with it where they won't incorporate your stuff to train, and then you can upload that data to it at that time to further it along. And that probably would be better than having them just take it off of anything and having it do. But the consideration with that is uh, anybody else in the world can download a YouTube video. Like you just you Google YouTube video downloader, you put the
It's,
link in and you download
it's
it, and then you upload it anyway. And
yeah,
then
it's in the public domain. You're
right.
right.
And so
Yeah.
I think that, you know, if it's in the public domain and you've uploaded that with the intention that people are going to be able to access it at any point in time and watch it at any point in time until you delete it, then I mean, I think in a lot of ways that's fair game. If it's private and you want it to keep it private, then I think it's unethical to use that private data for training. Customer data, PII, social media data for things that are marked private, right? One of the cool things that Elon just did with X is you can now opt out for letting your posts be used for training on X,
I
which is like
saw
a
that.
really cool idea. Like I don't care about what I post. I'm putting it out in public. So by all means. But for somebody where that's important to you for whatever reason, okay, great. But going back to this ability to upload something and get an output from it, if I'm the creative and I know what my style is and I can create something in that style, that is the coolest thing. Because now, instead of all of the effort that went into creating the first thing, if that model can replicate my creative ability with some guidance from me, the expert that knows how I think about those things and knows what went into it, I can 10x my productivity capability and being able to output 10 times more of that thing, like the other things that it used to become trained. And now if we're just talking about content generation, there is a human condition element to all of this, like the process of writing a book or creating a film, like as a human and doing something fulfilling, like that is an important creative activity. But in terms of getting that final output that is bringing value into the world or creating something exciting, like you can do 10 times more of that. Who doesn't want that ability? I found this really cool thing. There's an AI music generation company that is available. And so I started playing around where, I took a song that I own the rights to for one of my videos, and I used the AI to recreate the song. Like you can upload a snippet of that song, and it will create what it infers to be the rest of that song. And that's such a cool thing because you can also do a voice memo on your phone and record, you can hum a tune or make a beat that you think is cool, and then you can give it a prompting like make this into an electronic dance music, punchy, inspiring hype song, or whatever. And then you upload it with that prompt with your humming voice recording thing. You click go and it will turn it into a song for you. And some of the songs are actually really good, and yeah, that technology is pretty nascent too, but
You could
as
be
a
a
music
good
creator,
residual. You can release an AI co-produced hit, and that's
yeah,
going to happen. It probably
yeah,
already happened. We just
yeah,
don't
it's
know.
already happened. Yep. So I think there's a lot of benefit, and all that's doing is it'll create a lot of noise, but it's also going to create a lot more amazing things that have the opportunity to inspire a lot more people. Because maybe that song that you're not a music producer, you're not a musician, you can't play an instrument, but maybe you can use AI to generate something that you think is awesome that does become a hit. And some kid who's growing up who is a musician hears that song, they just think that is the coolest beat I've ever heard. and it causes them to go down this whole path of, learning more instruments and becoming a master, and then, becomes the next leading musician for something. You never know how these things play out, right? So I think that opportunities like that are abundant. You just have to, think about it from that lens versus the doom and gloom lens. But we got to pay attention to that stuff a little bit too.
It's
So
true. I do think we've talked about the creator economy. It's just getting started. AI is gonna enable the all ages, all backgrounds that just want to do stuff and maybe outside of their core domain, but they have a great idea.
mhm.
So the idea economy, I think we're gonna see some amazing new creations come out of it. And it's already happening slowly as we get to learn how to use this technology.
Yep.
Well, last thing I want to talk about before we wrap this version up, maybe leave some nuggets of actionable wisdom for the audience. When we talked at the beginning of this podcast how this is a new technology and the expertise out there to actually deploy it is being trained in real time, and we're learning as we go. What are some of the top things you think consumers of this technology need to pay out to be watched for working with companies? How do you know if you're working with the right people? I mean, there's a lot of great companies out there. I mean, not just ours. There's tons, but how do you kind of sift through people that are maybe experimenting with AI versus those that really know how to implement that trust vector? What are some of the things you would say to your peer set?
It's an interesting time because I'm going to share a couple things, but they're in conflict with each other. So there is something to be said for credibility in the space of companies that have been around for a very long time, right? Because there's trust that's accumulated over years, right? I'll give you a great example. Dell Technologies, 40 plus years, one of the most trusted companies in the industry.
Just
One of the
brand.
primary reasons why we partnered with them, because everybody knows Dell and they've got an amazing reputation, right? But then on the other side of this company age discussion, there are a bunch of young companies that are a couple months old that have created really cool things. And so I think that from an enterprise space, those two things are in conflict in a lot of ways because, well, do you go with the big established company? Do you go with the small innovative one? There are risks to both, right? The risk for a lot of big companies is they move a little bit slower because they're more mature, they're more thoughtful, more deliberate. They've been around the block a lot longer, and they're moving 100,000 person organizations. And that is not an easy task at that size. Versus the 2 or 3 person startup, the risks are a little bit different. Are they going to be around in 6 months? Do they have proper enterprise security capabilities so that your data is protected and things like that? The things that you take for granted with the big companies, but are actually really important in the enterprise space for the smaller ones. And so I think that, one of the happy mediums in that space is finding opportunities where you can combine the scale of the big with the innovation of the nimble and smaller and bring those together. And again, not an advertisement for us, but I think we've done that in a really good way. We're not 6 months old, we're 6.5 years old. We've got the enterprise security through working with companies like Dell, who evaluated and made sure that before they partnered with us, that would be an option. Whether you work with us or not, it doesn't matter. But look for companies like that have the maturity that is brought by working with the big ones who wouldn't put their name behind it if it wasn't validated. But they also have the ability to deliver that innovation because they're agile and they're nimble and they've built a practice around this new and cutting edge thing. But I think more so than just that credential, and we could probably, I think it would be a fun thing to unpack on the next one in more detail. But the one tidbit that I'll leave with today is this AI space is changing so frequently and so rapidly that the products that are built today are not the products that are going to be built in the future.
Right.
And the products that were already built a couple of years ago most of them are not ever going to be AI ready. And I think this is a longer conversation for another
It
time because it's
it
really cool.
is. And I think we should expand upon that because I do want to spend probably the next podcast. I want to open up on this concept because I would consider your company, our company, John, as more of we have the benefit of being a native AI company, meaning we didn't have any technical debt. You were
Yeah.
trying to build a technology that
We
needed
built a
AI.
platform first,
You
right?
build
The
it, it's a
whole point was
platform.
a platform.
So
Yep.
we don't have to, we don't have a lot of technical debt, but you are very wise that we're even pivoting as the technology evolves, we're evolving the platform to take
Mhm.
advantage, because this technology is not sitting still. Legacy companies, I think that's a lot of the opportunity they have is, do you redesign to retrofit AI or do you have to completely retool?
You got to
And
rethink
you got
entirely.
to rethink. And
That's
that's where it's
hard.
wrong. It is.
Yeah.
So
So that'll be a great conversation because I believe the next one up in the series is with Joe Balsamo, and Joe is our head of product. So that'll
and
be
he
a fun,
comes from a very
fun
large
trio.
organization. That's
Yes,
right.
yes.
We'll teach